Okay, so we're going to get started. Just to let you know, we pressed record, but I know you're already updated on the fact that we will be recording these sessions. We want to welcome you to Race Equality Charter in Practice, where we're going to be talking about the Race Equality Charter, or as we like to call it, the REC. Now, what the REC is a framework for universities to be able to understand the evidence, the systems, and the processes that are impacting race equality within an institution. And the purpose of this is so that we can begin to improve and address some of these race equalities, specifically, I would say, for Black, Asian, and other minority ethnic groups. Now, the REC Charter, you can apply for it every 5 years now. They haven't actually changed that, but it's 5 years you can apply, and there are 3 awards that you can apply for: bronze, silver, and gold. Now, DMU is currently at a bronze level, but there are no institutions that are above a bronze level. So we want to see if we can improve on that. Now, we are going to be applying for the Race Equality Charter, or a renewal of the Race Equality Charter, in October. And what we wanted to do today is really take you through some of the work that we do in order to put together the application form, which is going to be reviewing data of the university and answering specific questions of it and looking for solutions. So it's going to be a very interactive program that we're doing today, because we want you to kind of ask some of these questions and also to look at some of those solutions as well. What we're going to do now is hand over to Chris, the head of EDI, and he's going to take us into a fuller background of the REC, and then I will come back afterwards and we'll be looking at some student and some staff data. So now, Chris, please come on up.
Hi everyone, thanks for coming in. Nice to sort of see you virtually. We're doing this hybrid, so we've got a few people in the room as well. So it's the first hybrid event that we've run as part of the DCOL conference week. So hopefully it will go smoothly. So thanks, Sophie, for the introduction. So what I'm going to do is just go through quite quickly what really a little bit more detail of what the Race Equality Charter is about. So it was set up about 8 years ago now, and was founded on these principles here, which every institution that's a member of the Race Equality Charter, whether or not you hold an award, each of the universities that signed up to the Race Equality Charter commits to and signs up to agreeing to these principles here. So I think you'll see from them that very clearly that in being a member of the Race Equality Charter, we as DMU sort of signed up to the fact that racial inequalities are a significant issue that need tackling within higher education, but also that racism is an everyday facet of UK society, and racial inequalities manifest themselves in everyday situations, processes and behaviours. And I think for me, this is kind of quite a fundamental difference between some race equality work and the Race Equality Charter, because what the Race Equality Charter is very much saying is that racism is both a structural as well as a sort of an acute issue that we need to tackle. It also comes from sort of the perspective that actually universities can't reach their full potential until we unlock the talent and unleash the talent of all of our staff and students. We very much see that in things like the awarding gap, where clearly, you know, we need to be changing the way in which we do things so that all of our students can demonstrate their talent here at DMU. Very much about long-term change, so it's not about sort of like a single positive action program. It's about looking at our systems and processes and changing us as an institution rather than changing the individual. Now, there will be a bit of a push and pull with this, because actually we need to do both. We need to, you know, support people to achieve and to succeed, but we need to get our systems and processes right in order that we can facilitate that as well. What's quite an important point of the Race Equality Charter is that there is very many difference within different ethnic groups, and we recognise that. And you know, as a university, we've been having these discussions. So it's now our race network is the Race Equality Network, moved away from the Black, Asian, Minority Ethnic Network, and as a university, ULB have now committed to stop using the term BAME, recognising that BAME reduces too much the very many different ethnicities that are considered under the still broad categories of Black, Asian, Minority ethnic staff and students. And clearly within that, then the next key point of the Race Charter is that intersectionality is really important, and that it is the combination of ethnicity with gender, with disability, with our sexuality, with all the things that make people individual need to be recognised and sort of taken account of in the Race Equality Charter. So I mentioned, there we go, 2015, so I said 8 years, so 7 years. I've talked about that you must commit to those principles in order to be a member. DMU was one of the founding members of the Race Equality Charter, so back in the pilot in 2015, I think there were 22 institutions that applied and we were one of 8 successful, and we were the first to have our reward renewed in 2018, and as Sophie said, we are again applying for renewal in 22. We applied last time for a silver level award, and we will be applying for a silver level award again this time. To be a silver level institution, you need to demonstrate some impact, and I think through the work that we've been doing through DCOL, we have seen some really positive changes across the institution, but as you'll see from some of the data that we're going to go on to, there are still some significant challenges that face us, and we've only picked a couple of areas to look at this morning, because the Race Equality Charter is huge, as I'll go on to talk about next. So in order to undertake the Race Equality Charter, we need to do all of these things. So taking into account the lived experience through staff and student surveys is really important. Bottom right there, we've set up our self-assessment team, which is made up of people from across the institution who've got the power to make change. And feeding into the self-assessment team are our staff and student critical friends group. So staff and students of colour who've got lived experience, who can call out exactly what is happening at the institution and hopefully inform what we're doing in response to that. The Charter requires us to look at all stages of the staff and student life cycle. So we in our draft application at the moment, we're already up to about 140 pages of charts and data, which looks at our staff and students by UK, non-UK, part-time learning, distance learning, part-time staff, full-time staff, contract mode, whether they're permanent or on a fixed-term contract. So all these issues that actually we need to be looking at structurally in order to reflect about where we can make improvements as an institution. And what's really key with this is in the bottom left there is that it has to be an honest, open self-reflection to where we are as an institution and what our issues are, because it goes back to that first principle of the Charters, that unless we acknowledge the fact that racism is an issue, institutional racism as well as acute racism is an issue for us as an institution, we can't move on. So through all of our discussions, and you'll recognise this through those of you that are familiar with the DCOL kind of working definition, it is that we as an institution do acknowledge that, and Katie as the sort of the day-to-day head of the institution acknowledges is that we have got work to do. Back over to Sophie, who's going to take us through the kind of the interactive part of the morning.
Thank you, Chris. So what we've done is we've taken one set of student data, one set of staff data, and we want you to do the job that we're doing. Not to take it easier on us, but for you to just see what is involved in putting the rec together. And now these are some of the questions that we're going to want you to ask of the student data and the staff data. We're going to give you 5 minutes here in the room and also 5 minutes online to first look at the student data, to come up with a few answers to these questions, and then we'll move on to the staff data. Don't be frightened, anyone. We can do it. We're here together. So the questions that we want you to ask is, once you look at the data, what are some of the key observations that you're seeing? Is there anything that looks a bit out of whack, or is that's quite interesting? Why that discrepancy? Those are the kind of observations we're looking for. Next, what is your experience of the situation represented by the data? So do you think this is true? Has that been your experience? Has it not? And number 3, what do you see as a possible solution, and how do you see the universities addressing that specific challenge that we've identified? So those are 3 questions, but I will remind you of those afterwards. So now we'll just look at the first set of data. So this is a representation of UK undergraduate in-year leavers, so students that leave the university. So we have this graph will show over the past 5 years, from year 2015 up until 2019/20. And what you'll see there, so I don't know if you can see, it's slightly omitted at the bottom, but the red bars are for white backgrounds, blue for Asian backgrounds, green for black backgrounds, and purple is for mixed backgrounds. So if we can see trending that black students in undergraduate years are the most likely to leave DMU, usually at a much higher rate than others, then followed on by mixed. So those are some of the things that we're going to be looking at there. And another set of data that goes with this is reasons for leaving. So once we've looked at who's leaving, we've then tried to identify specifically why are these students leaving. Now, it doesn't cover all of the reasons. They're still quite, I would say, broad areas, but one of them is academic failure. They've left in bad standing or they weren't allowed to progress. That will be on the left-hand side, the first lot of data. In the middle, we then have those who are excluded. And on the right-hand side, people who have left for other reasons or they've just dropped out of the university. So, like I said, there'll be academic failure, exclusion in the middle, and then for other personal reasons. So looking at these data pages, I'll leave these ones on because the other ones showed like the rates, but these ones will show the reasons. And I just want you to take a couple of minutes to ask any questions. So I'm just going to put myself on mute. Feel free to use the chat. And then if you're online, please use the chat and then we'll come back and feedback in 5 minutes time. So it's great, we can see some people talking in the chat and we're also having a little bit of discussion here in the room. So I'm just going to ask people to kind of share the point that they have put into the chat. So please come online, if that's how you say it. Put on your microphone. I see blessing and observation, a similar ones to ones that I know Chris and I and the team have looked at as well. So did you want to just come up and share your point, please, Blessing?
Oh, yes, thank you. I was just making an observation that when you look at the pattern of data, if you look at the reasons for leaving under academic failure and so forth, then Black students have got the highest rates there and exclusions as well. Whereas white students, based on that, have got the highest rates of leaving because of personal reasons. So there's clearly an issue there in terms of the processes that are in place for academic failure and exclusions as well.
Thank you, Blessing. Thank you for sharing on that. Jenny, did you want to elaborate on the point that you've put in to the chat?
Yeah, hi everybody. Yeah, I'm perhaps I shouldn't be shocked, but I am shocked that Black students, sort of, that's what stood out for me, seem to be being excluded at sort of a much higher rate. And I was thinking about the Child Q case, you know, the young girl who was strip searched at school, and we've heard a lot about adultification, and whilst they are adults, that the Black students, I'm just wondering if they are being seen as sort of older rather than just sort of 18-year-olds, and certain behaviours, which I know from my sort of previous work with community groups, that certainly young Black men are seen as being quite aggressive and loud and sort of more subject to stop and search, and sort of likely to for teachers and subsequently law enforcement to come down harder on sort of misdemeanors or just sort of high spirits, seeing it as more threatening.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you. And I was just asking the room, I think that Child Q, I think she was actually younger than that. She was still within secondary school. She wasn't above the age of 18, so I wouldn't even have called her a young adult. She was a teenager.
Yeah, she was 15, wasn't she?
Yeah, so still a child, I would say. So thank you for that, Jenny. Thank you. Kay, did you want to come on? I know you're saying that you were just underpinning what Blessing was saying.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I think those stats really do kind of confirm or just a clear illustration of the experience that Blessing was talking about yesterday. So that whole thing around a lack of belonging, the impact of negative stereotypes, having to try and, you know, the pressure of trying to conform to other kind of cultural norms and change yourself and speak in a different way. And when Blessing was talking yesterday, it really made me reflect on, it's like the profile of people who were there to help, say, for example, in library learning services. You know, again, Blessing was saying the impact of that experience can reduce help-seeking behaviour. So the help is there, but people don't want to go because they feel they might be perceived in a negative way, or they're not going to be understood. So this would all impact. The other thing that I've put there is accept Studiosity. Studiosity is something that we started subscribing to last year, and that is an online 24/7 sort of study support system, particularly around writing feedback, for example. So then the idea is that does reduce one of those barriers. Just thought I'd put that one out there. But yeah, how we marry those two, how we can possibly, you know, make sure that people do go and seek help when they need it, and how do we make that a more kind of inviting process, you know, and practical process for people to engage with.
And I think you're really starting to, well, you're moving really on to the third question, which isn't a problem, but it does show once you're starting to identify the issues that we have, it's like, how then do we address that? And we have to think of it as a university-wide system or process that needs to be changed, amended, edited, because it's not just, I would say, having a diverse panel on the exclusion board.
No.
It's going to know, well, what happens up until the point that they're there. What are all the steps that have happened to them to contribute to this, and that's where we really want to be looking and working. So thank you, Kay. Rachel, did you want to come in?
Thanks, Sophie. Yeah, I guess I'm just picking up on similar things to Kay, really, and linking back to the data that Blessing shared. Because like the library, I think a lot of our support services are, mainly staffed by white women. Actually, if we think about the disability team where I'm based, and I know Lara's here from the mental health team, so she might want to come in from the mental health side. So I'm wondering behind some of these figures is where the students are just feeling unable to access that support, or not feeling that it's for them. And I was interested in Kay's comments about studiosity there, because looking at some of our appointment data, which Lucy's helping me to do in disability, what we've seen is a slight difference in who accesses our service when it's been mainly an online service. So during the pandemic, Black students seem to be more making more use of the service than prior to the pandemic, when we were, mainly face to face. So we've got to analyse that data a little bit more. But I think similarly to the library, that, there are supports here, aren't they, that might prevent people getting to the point of the academic failure hearing. But if they don't feel welcoming, if people aren't feeling comfortable about accessing those, I think that's absolutely key.
Great, thank you so much, Rachel. I can see you're writing some things in the chat, Hardy, but I'm going to come to you a little bit later because you're moving on to like the solutions bit, and I want to make sure that we keep it in that place. I've got Lara with a hand up, so Lara, please come in.
Hi, yeah, just to follow on from Rachel's point, really, I think, yeah, something that I'm noticing around perhaps more white students leaving due to personal reasons is that around the fact that perhaps white students do access those support services more and feel more comfortable to discuss those reasons, and yeah, what would be the reasons behind that as well. I just find it really interesting and quite shocking, I think, but then at the same time sort of not shocking to look at the data either. But thank you.
Thank you, Lara. Thank you. And I agree, when looking at the data, it looks shocking, but then you think about the inequalities that we hear about so often, that actually probably does make a lot of sense. So I understand that point completely. I want to move on to the second question that we have now, which is, what is our experience of the data? I'm going to ask Derek if you would like to talk a little bit about, because I know you work with students. When you saw this data, did you feel this is reflective of what you see on the ground, or was it a surprise to you?
I think, I don't know if everyone
Can people hear Derek?
Hello?
You might need to come up, Derek.
Would you
Yeah.
Oh boy, here we go.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
That's okay. I think, yeah. Hi guys. I think based on what we're seeing, it's correlative with the student voice with respect to some of our processes, and I think, as mentioned already, if students are not able to understand or access the preventative measures in place, building up to, let's say, an academic offence, then they miss out on that. I think a lot of students largely don't have enough understanding of what student, be it the regulation, be it, as Hardy mentioned, the personal tutoring elements of things. That's where we kind of miss out. And I'll say Black students and Asian and minority students miss out on those key details, which, supposedly a white student may have based on their history of understanding how the system works, having a history of maybe past, siblings, parents, friends, having access to the higher education system, may have, benefit or may have greater insight of how things just operate. So I think, it's seeing this in a way, kind of adding to the lived experiences, it makes sense why this is the case, because students, particularly Black students, as we learned yesterday equally, don't seek support until, it's the last, at the last turn where they've been told, yeah, we can't do anything. That's when they start to, look for support. And I've had several instances when I was at the SU where students will come when they've heard the news that they have to get kicked out, or they've got in trouble. So once they've got in trouble, that's when they come looking for support. And a lot of time they go to a space that they know, a face that they know. So I kind of, these things, I guess, in a way, doesn't surprise at all.
Okay, I don't know if anybody else had any experiences or if they wanted to respond to what it is that Derek said, or any other personal experience that you maybe had in your department or have heard about that correlate with the data, or do you feel actually the data isn't fully representing the picture at DMU at the moment? Feel free to put a hand up or just come in. Hardy?
Thanks, Sophie. Not so much of an observation of the data, but the observation for you asking the question. If who is joined us this afternoon for this session, if there's saying, I'm not saying they are saying it, but I'm not trying to put words in people's mouths, but if they're not observing these trends, if they're not aware that a large proportion of Black students fail because of academic failure or exclusion, if they're not aware of that, what it would suggest is they're not putting in the steps to address these things. Okay, and I think some of it's about having these conversations with academic staff about how much are they aware that these kind of trends actually exist within their faculties or departments or subject disciplines. And if there is no awareness, okay, or there's a lack of awareness, I suppose there's a piece of work that the institution needs to do, which obviously you guys are doing, we're all doing as part of this piece of work, about sharing that data to then encourage program teams to put in interventions. But I think sometimes, if this kind of being an academic for about 20 years, I don't think in my lifetime as an academic this kind of information has been shared with me about my student profile, and therefore maybe I wouldn't always be aware of what I can do if I just don't know what the scale of the problem, especially on very large programs where you've got hundreds of students. Yes, a proportion of them might be students of colour, but if you're not aware, you might just put it down to the fact that students have just stopped attending after week 6. We know there's a lack of student engagement. So not really an observation of what I know about my students, but just an observation that I've never really had this information shared with me as an academic. So I've never felt empowered to do something in that respect.
I think that's definitely a observation that is also a lived experience, because I don't think it's just an experienced person with students, but from the academic perspective, it's like, well, actually, how often are we getting this information to be actually making a difference with it and for it to actually impact what it is that we're doing? So I think that's still a vital point. Thank you, Hardy. We've got Mel in the room who wanted to share something. I don't know if you wanted to.
Yeah.
Come on, Mel.
That means come up to
So that people can hear you, yes.
Hi everyone. So I suppose one of the things that kind of sprang to mind from my experience is about how far do we know whether people are actually adhering to policies and procedures that are meant to mitigate against some of the kind of the discriminatory bias behaviours that that can kind of be exhibited. So an example being anonymous marking. So for the vast majority of assessments, we're meant to mark anonymously. What I have found, and I had students contact me in the last piece of assessment that they submitted to me, when I put a notice on Blackboard saying, please do not put your student number or your name on your assessment because we mark anonymously. And a number of the students came back to me saying, oh, I put my name or I put my student number. Now, student number for me is less of an issue because I haven't got time to go looking at the students. But the principle is I could, if I wanted to look at the student, I could do. But what was worrying is that students were saying, because we've had academic members of staff telling us that we should be putting our name and student number on assessments. So although they may have set Blackboard for anonymous marking, they're asking students to put identifying information on their assessments. And to me, that is really concerning because they're circumventing processes that are put in place in order to try and ensure that discrimination doesn't occur. And then the question for me is, well, okay, what do we do about that? And what is it? Where is the accountability for that? Because some academics are obviously using that as a means of potentially discriminating, and that may not be in the forefront of their minds when they're asking students to do that, but that is potentially going to be the outcome, and that will impact things like referrals for academic misconduct, and also obviously the grades that they're awarding students. So I think there is an element of how do we evaluate how the process is being implemented that are put in place to safeguard. So that was just something that, and that might impact on that data.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. I saw some shocked faces coming up when you were saying that, because you want to think the best, but you really want to, why would somebody want that information? What differences are going to make to the marking of it? Okay, so we're going to look at the possible solutions just quickly so that we have enough time to look at the second loss of data. So what are some of the solutions? Hardy, I'm going to ask you to go first, just because you put a few solutions in there or some things that could help us to kind of improve these statistics.
Thank you, Sophie. Yeah, I think I'll start off with the point about personal tutoring. At the moment, personal tutoring, I would suspect from a lot of students, it's just seen as something that they can access if they want to. They get sent an email within the first weeks of joining the university, and they're invited to see their personal tutor. But not all students will take advantage of that opportunity. And I think the experience of personal tutoring across institutions, not just at DMU, is extremely varied, and there's no structure. Okay, so unless a student comes with a particular issue or a point, you know, in terms of what value the personal tutor could add can be lost. I personally think a much more structured personal tutoring system should be in place, where it's very much aimed at academic support. Okay, the welfare, pastoral elements, there are other student services available across the institution that can help students with those. But I think that building that academic development support within personal tutoring and having them timetabled, okay, so students understand that they're actually things that they need to go and attend rather than just voluntary things. So that's one suggestion that I would put forward. The second suggestion that I talked about is making sure that the academic skills development is firmly embedded within the curriculum. It's part of the taught programme. So all students very early on, and should be built in very early on into the curriculum, are being exposed to that. So if you would, colleagues obviously spoke about sometimes students don't feel they can access those services, even though we have a brilliant library support team, and we also have you know, tutors that will always go that extra mile to support students. Okay, but they don't feel that they can seek that support. But if that's already built in and it's timetabled, it's part of your week-to-week. It's not just something just talked about in the induction and then signposted when it comes to assessment time. It is part of that weekly skills development on top of the curriculum content. Okay, and I think that would help all students. So they're just two solutions I would put forward.
Right, great. Thank you for those, Hardy. Thank you. Did anybody else want to come with any solutions that they thought of? I can see Kay, you're writing in the chat, so I'll probably give one or two more people a chance, then we'll move on to the next set of data. I see a point here that you've put in, Jenny. It says, I was struck by one comment that students seek support after they have got into trouble. Do we have any mechanism for students to talk to someone neutral if they feel things are going wrong? Maybe people like me in professional services could help. And I think that's a really interesting point. I know that Derek and I have done a student critical friends group. And I think off the back of that, some of the information that we've got is sometimes one of the issues that you might be having, or a person you might have an issue with, or a teacher might actually be your personal tutor. And then where do you go? Who do you access if you feel like those issues are happening within your course, and that's the person that you're supposed to be led to speak to? So I know that there are various barriers that we still have in place that we need to circumvent to make sure that students are accessing the support that they need. But I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that, Jenny. I see on the screen.
Yeah, well, you might not want to and I've been in this position at university, obviously a long time ago, where you don't want to say that you're struggling to the person who's going to be assessing your work, because you feel that might lead to sort of more issues for you. But I can see a value in somebody who works for the organisation and who's reasonably accessible like myself, but I don't have any student contact. I'm not a tutor. I'm not going to be meeting your tutors. I'm not involved in the academic side that could be helpful for students if we did have some kind of scheme for people to sign up, obviously with safeguards, so students are not just brought into contact with fairly random individuals, and also for those people to have support in how to help the students and where to, you know, potentially refer them on if they did encounter perhaps somebody in sort of experiencing kind of mental distress that you really feel needs additional help. But otherwise I feel it's a bit sort of medicalised, like see a counsellor or see your tutor, which might not be serving people well, whether they're Black students or not. But you can see that people from a different background might feel that there is nothing for them or nobody who will understand the problem.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Vinny. I don't know if you wanted to add something, Derek. I saw a hand up.
Yeah.
Then we'll move on to the next lot of things.
It was just to support the point that Hardeep made, because essentially the stuff we're seeing here are all kind of, what's the word, symptoms of a larger problem, you know. And I think if the problems that we're seeing here are based on structural institutional issues, then we equally have to address it from that main cause position. And I guess if, you know, asking these students, you know, why they got to that point will help us to understand, which adds into Hardeep's point, because if we've got personal tutoring, we've got our student voice systems, if they're all not structured to actually avoid us from getting to this point, then we're always going to be treating, I guess, an endpoint symptom than the actual cause. We're always going to keep suffering different things, because it might be that in a few years' time, Asian students ends up being the highest, you know, students who have been excluded for academic reasons, you know. So I think it's really about, you know, ensuring our systems are well in place to be preventative in the measure that, well, be it from induction throughout to graduation, how we ensure students understand the basic and, you know, the basic things they need to succeed. So if there's academic support, where do they go? Where is it? How do we make it that they are both aware and able to access these things? And I think if we then kind of start looking at those structural problems, then actually we'll make it that the least of us can actually access the very best of our support. Whereas I feel like, as Hardeep said, as it stands, there's no clear coordination or no clear structure. So as a result, those that then know more get more, and those that don't know as much get the least of it. So I think it's really adding to that structural needs to coordinate things better. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Derek. Thank you. So we're going to move on to the staff data now. Yes, let's do that. So the staff data is very small. I'm not sure if I can. We had a lot of issues trying to get the staff data up here because it was just. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to explain what's going on in the staff data, and hopefully that will be helpful. So what we're looking at here is professional and support staff ethnicity by grade and year. So if we look at the bottom, so yeah, you can see my cursor, great. So down at the bottom, we have grade A at the university pay scale, right up until senior executive level. So we have A through to H, then S1 and S2 level, then S3 and S2L level, and then senior executive, if that's correct. Now, what we have also is a breakdown of what the grade has looked like over the past 5 years. So each color, again, will be representative of a different race or ethnic group. So again, it sticks to the similar colors. So for minority mixed ethnic groups, we have purple. For green, we have black. For dark blue, we have Asian. For light blue, we have Indian. And for red, we have white. Now, what we're seeing here, I'm not going to give us in 5 minutes to chat because we've only got a limited amount of time, so we'll talk about this as a group together. And what we see here is that if you look at the Black ethnic group, we don't have anyone represented past the point of grade G at the university on the pay scale. So if you look just here where I'm circling, grade G in 2020 year to 2021, there was only 2% of Black staff who were getting paid at a grade G and nothing above that. At the very top end of senior executive, we only have represented mixed ethnic and white. Again, at the level just underneath that, we only have Indian, a little bit of mixed ethnic, and then, thank you Chris for putting in the chat, and then white. We did have Black representation in the S1 level, but that was in 2016 and no longer. And this is currently a reflection of where we are as a professional support staff ethnicity at the university. So I don't know if people wanted to put in the chat or if people wanted to just put their hand up and talk, because we've only got a limited amount of time. Blessing, please come in.
Just an observation really, and just by looking at that data, it really shows that there's a ceiling really for Black staff, and it stops much earlier. Let me just have a look at the picture. Grade, is it grade G? Yeah. So
yes, grade G.
Yeah. So it seems that Black staff are not going beyond that. Representation of people is mixed ethnicity is a bit better, but still it trails off after grade H there. But yeah, I think those numbers are shocking and should be shocking for anyone that's looking at them.
I agree, Blessing. I agree, and it's something when I saw this data, when Chris and I were looking at it, I said to him, it just makes it very clear if I want to progress, it's not going to be at DMU. That if I want to earn more, I need to move on because the data shows me it's not possible. And I think that is becoming even more apparent as I know of more and more Black staff who are leaving DMU. If I can be honest, I think there's more and more increasing numbers of Black staff who are leaving DMU for whatever reason that might be. But if we're seeing this sort of data, how do we even encourage them to stay? When it can say, fact is, chances are I'm not going to progress past the point that I am. And when we're looking lower down on the pay scale, that's where Black staff are much more highly represented. So we've got on a question here from John Lee saying, do you want to address that, Chris? John, Chris is just going to come up to talk about this.
Hi, John. Thanks. One of the challenges with the race charter is the sort of getting through GDPR requirements. So I can't answer your question directly, but overall it gives a picture. But yeah, I hope you understand I can't be specific about that because you're talking about an individual member of staff that's identifiable. But the data, let me just say, I'm fairly comfortable with the data and its accuracy at this point. Thanks, John.
Thanks, and some people might not identify under certain categories as well. It's something to be aware of when we're thinking about how people self-represent or whether they declare, because on the right-hand side we have the grey. If you see the grey percentages, these are the people who have not declared. Okay, I'm not sure if there were any more questions or observations that we had or any key observations that we had about this data. If not, we can move straight on to what is our experience of this data. So I see Jenny's put a comment.
Can I ask? Sure. So it's a question for me actually, which is something that we'll be addressing in the race equality chart. But one thing when I look at the data is I can see that overall through the years our ethnic profile is diversifying. Yes, we've got particular issues on representation of Black staff as we go up in seniority. But one question I have, and maybe this is sort of a lived experience question, is there a reason why, in general, our diversity is increasing, or do we think it's just an accidental occurrence that's happening because of where we're based or something else? So that's sort of the question I'm grappling with myself for us as an institution at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. So the question is, do we have a reason why our general diversity is increasing? Is that the question, Chris?
Yeah. But not at the senior grades. We can see not at the senior grades, but at the other grades.
Rachel, please come in.
Thanks, Sophie. It was just a kind of personal observation, really, in that having, in terms of taking part in recruitment processes at DMU, I've sort of in my time at DMU, I've seen a change, because we've had a change, I think, in policy around the diversity of our recruitment panels and a requirement to be more diverse from a gender and ethnicity perspective. And I as a person carrying out interviews, I feel that certainly is important in terms of increasing diversity. Certainly if I'm chairing a recruitment panel, I'm getting different expertise, different viewpoints from people on my panel than I might otherwise have done if I'd stayed with the same old people that I would be on a panel with. And I think that may be having a positive impact, but I don't know if that's borne out by the data, just a personal experience.
No, I think that's a good question, and we definitely look at panels and interview panels, and obviously we're only looking at a small percentage of the data today, but I know some of the other data that we've looked at, that when it looks at promotions or interviews, it's saying that we are interviewing, but there is a smaller likelihood of ethnic minority groups getting put through to getting a job. So they're coming, but they're falling out at a higher rate in terms of moving from an interview onto getting the post. So there is something that is going on also that we need to look at within that process. So something that Mel put up here, which I was going to bring up, but I'm glad someone did. She said that this data also shows potential issues with the opportunities for promotion and for professional staff, and particularly Black professional staff. And I think that is something definitely to think about. I think with our promotions on hold at the moment, what's that going to mean for Black staff if they also get access to, well, even if I wait for promotion, chances are I'm not going to get it because nobody's getting promotion from certain groups. And some of the other information that we've teased out when looking at this data is, do professional staff know where they can progress to? So are you in a role and say, I know that there's a very clear progression of where I want to go to, I know how to get there, I know the steps, I know what job I can apply for past my own post, because I think within the academic community, even though I know that we are trying to look at pathways and how people access certain positions, there is still a very clear understanding that I go from lecturer to senior lecturer to associate professor, like I know where I'm going, but is that the same within the professional services side of the university? That's just a question that I'm throwing out there. I don't know if anyone else had anything to say about the data. So, John, did you want to just talk about the point that you put into the chat? Because I think that is also a point that is very interesting and one that has come up when we've had some of these discussions in various meetings with other staff members.
Yeah, I was just answering Melanie's question really about whether there's a different process. So generally, more senior, the most senior appointments, then professional search agencies would be used. And that's my experience within the sector generally, and at Board of Governors level.
Thank you, John. And I think that's things that other people have said, and I guess we don't have time to go into, you know, are we building enough? Are we building up our own workers in order to be able to access those positions and those posts? Are we looking to try and find systems so that we're not constantly outsourcing, but we are actually developing people so that they can access these positions? There's definitely something there. But Anna, I saw your hand up. Please come in.
Yeah, thanks. You said exactly what I was going to bring to the table. I think it's about the development from the lower to the top rows as well. And I think trying to answer a bit of the question you raised, there is also this difficulty from the professional services of mobility from departments. Maybe the different career paths are not as clear as we tend to move from administrative to higher levels within its own faculty or within its own area of work. Maybe there is a need of just trying to see how much in terms of development and opportunities come from networking rather than looking at people's expertise and ambitions in terms of progression.
Great, thank you so much for that point, Anna. We've got a few minutes left, so I'm just going to move straight on to any solutions. I know Anna kind of touched on a little bit of a solution there of things that we can be thinking about to kind of address these challenges, but I'm not sure if anybody else had any. It doesn't have to be a solution, but it can be a thought or, you know, something that you think, or have we thought about this? Is this a way that we can think about this a little bit differently to try and address this issue? Rachel?
Thanks, Sophie. I just wanted to pick up on Anna's point really and sort of say, well, within professional services, we have limited ability, for example, to kind of find out about what happens within other teams. So if you're working within a faculty, you can get experience within that faculty, but finding out what happens outside of that is limited. So, you know, having opportunities, I think, where people could shadow across the institution is a really important developmental tool to find out about what's going on elsewhere. And that's not open to us in professional services, as far as I'm aware.
Thank you for that, Rachel. And some of the experiences that I've heard as well is that if people want to progress, they have then had to change the faculty or the department or the area that they're working in. And what happens then is that you might not be necessarily moving on to a higher pay grade. You might have to take a less pay or an equal pay in order to get an experience or to get access to be able to progress. And then we're also seeing these barriers that are in place that are stopping people from progressing as quickly as they should. Something else that has been brought up in some of the working groups that we've had looking specifically at this data is there's also a low turnover in higher grade roles. So they're saying people can be in a role for 10 years, 15 years at a senior level, and then that also doesn't give, not that people should move on, but it also cannot give an opportunity for other roles because they come up so infrequently. So that's also something that people highlighted. So I think that's it for us looking through the data. If you have any more questions or observations, feel free to put them in the chat because we will read them and look over them. But what we really wanted to show you is some of the things that we're doing when we're looking at the Race Equality Charter. We're looking at data, we're picking it apart, we're trying to understand the various reasons why they are behind this. And I think that has been helped so much by the student groups and the staff groups because they bring in perspectives and experiences that we might not be aware of, or things that might be happening in their faculty that might be having an effect that we might not be aware of in other areas and faculties. So what I'm going to do now is hand over to Chris, and he's just going to talk about some of the next steps for us as a team looking at this Race Equality Charter information, and also other ways that you can get involved with us in doing this work. Thank you.
Thanks, Sophie, and thanks everyone for your contributions in the chat and over video as well. That's been really helpful. So just really quickly, I'm conscious of the time. So today's been really helpful. We'll take the discussion, take the comments, observations and the suggestions, and we'll fold that into our Race Equality Charter submission. If you want to get involved further, email myself, Sophie, or equality@DMU, and we can give you details of the various different working groups that we've got going on to inform the Race Equality Charter and the subsequent action plan, including the staff and student critical friends groups, and also other consultation that we'll be holding on the data. Once we put the submission out there, the data will go live. It will be public documents. So some of those comments around, you know, what happens to the data, or can we have more of this data? So Hardy, thinking particularly about some of your comments, that data will be there, and you can work with either the EDI team or the HR business partners or the SPS business partners to understand a little bit more what might be happening locally to your in your student cohorts or in your service users as well. So just wanted to say thank you everyone for taking part. Hopefully it's been interesting. If there's some particular bits of data that you're interested in finding a bit more about, as I say, please do drop me or Sophie a line and we'll see if we can help with that. But in any case, all your perspectives today have been really valuable. So thank you very much. Yeah. Okay, brilliant. Okay, great. Have a good rest of the afternoon and thank you everyone for joining in. Krishna's here as well. I just want to say thank you to Krishna as well for making this in-person event happen as well. So thanks, Chris.